everybody. Today we're going to take a look at reproductive systems. We're going to look at various animals and how they reproduce, but we'll spend most of our time focusing on human reproduction. So in other words, we are talking about the birds and the bees today. I put a few pictures up here. We're very familiar with the human male and female and the way they reproduce. However, some of the roles and some of the anatomy differs in various animals. For example, in seahorses, you see the male is actually the one that carries the babies. And that's different from what we're used to. And you see a couple earthworms here. And earthworms, many of us know, are hermaphrodites. So they have both male and female parts in their ability to produce eggs and sperm. So let's take a closer look at the various reproductive systems and strategies amongst animals. First, we'll take a look at a very simple form called asexual reproduction. And asexual means without sex. So these animals have the ability to reproduce without having sex. And when they do, the offspring that they produce usually has half the genetic content as the parent. And we call that haploid. Now, sometimes it might have the same amount, which we would call a diploid condition, but often this haploid amount of genetic material is common with animals that go through asexual reproduction. So, if something is reproducing asexually, that means that sperm and eggs are not going to meet. Is there an advantage to asexual reproduction? Yes. When conditions are unchanging, an organism can produce a lot of offspring quickly. So if the conditions are right, if the environmental habitat that this animal lives in is perfectly fine, there's abundant resources, there's no reason for this animal to reproduce another way because it's successful in that specific environment. There are three types of asexual reproduction we'll mention. One is called budding, another one's called fragmentation, and the third one is called parthenogenesis. So in budding, new individuals arise from outgrowths of existing ones. So here we have a hydra who is budding off a new polyp, and that polyp is going to have exactly the same type of genetic content as the parent. In fact, it's going to be a clone of the parent. So with budding and very simple animals, a piece starts to grow off the original and it can release. Possibly water will take this to its new home, and from there it will carry on its own life and maybe bud itself. Fragmentation is the breaking of the body into pieces, some or all of which develop into adults. So in this case, we have a planarian who's been cut in half, and both halves wind up growing the other half of a brand new planarian. So from the halves came two new ones. This special case right here with this sponge is called fission. So when this sponge grows to a certain size, it will split down the middle and you'll have two new sponges from that. There are limits to regeneration, like if you were just to, cut a very small tip of a flatworm off, could it regenerate from the small tip? No. There has to be a certain amount of mass there in terms of the cells in order for a successful regeneration to occur. And the third type of asexual reproduction is called parthenogenesis, where a male is not necessary, and instead the female finds a way to combine two eggs and then put the genetic content of the two will become the new individual's genetic content. So normal fertilization works like this. A precursor egg divides into four. Three of them will become discarded polar bodies, and this one here will have half of the female's genetic content. When a sperm enters into the egg, that doubles the genetic content, and there's a full set of genes ready for this particular animal. And this one here, they're focusing in on shark. In parthenogenesis, the egg, instead of dividing out and losing half its genetic content, the egg will double and then divide its genetic material into two cells, which we didn't see before with sexual reproduction. So these two cells then combine and the genetic content comes back together to give it enough of a genome to produce a viable offspring. So in this case here, it is a virgin birth because there was no actual male sex to produce the offspring. Instead, the female's body had an adaptation, almost like a plan B, that allowed it to, without the presence of males, reproduce. And, evolution is very crafty. If all the males died in a given population, it is advantageous for a female to be able to go through parthenogenesis and possibly produce offspring, even though there's no males there. So not only do sharks do this, but many lizards do, and insects do it as well. So there are quite a few animals, and we're discovering more and more that are able to reproduce without actually being inseminated by a male. In this one, we have a Komodo dragon, which goes through the same type of parthenogenesis that the shark did. So we wonder, of course, what would Darwin think about this? So we also found that turkeys are able to go through parthenogenesis, and I think it probably would have blown Darwin's mind to understand that no males were necessary. So to summarize, types of asexual reproduction, we have parthenogenesis, we have budding, and we have fragmentation. Those three allow organisms to reproduce without actually having sex with another animal. Okay, so for sexual reproduction then, the egg of one parent will be fertilized by the sperm of another. Animals usually produce gametes in their organs called the gonads, whereas the testes will produce sperm and ovaries produce eggs. And then fertilization is the official term that we use to describe the sexual union of the egg and the sperm. Now, when animals sexually reproduce, it results in genetic recombination. In parthenogenesis, budding, and fragmentation, you typically produce clones that have the same DNA content as the parent. But when sexual reproduction happens, those genes get all mixed up, and the offspring is a new, unique individual carrying parts of each parent, both male and female. So there's an increase in variability in the offspring, providing an increase in the reproductive success of parents in changing environments. So where we saw a stable, good environment can cause animals to rely on the asexual reproduction. If the environment changes, which most do, then sexual reproduction is the better way to produce offspring because of that variability. You'll have some that are better suited to the environment than others. Whereas if you have all one kind of offspring and there's something catastrophic like a virus or some environmental thing that happens, they can all be wiped out very quickly. But if there's a number of offspring with different genomes, then the ability for one to survive better than another is probably in play. So we mentioned that stable environments facilitate asexual development, perpetuating successful genotypes. With sexual reproduction, we have a shuffling of genes, and the elimination of harmful genes will occur as a result of that. So there are some reproductive strategies we can mention as well. We'll go through a few of these. First of all, we have oviparous. Oviparous is a depositor of eggs into the external environment. So if you are just burying eggs or depositing them in a particular area, that's going to have a lot of advantages to the parents who do that. And mainly in fact that they don't have to have any involvement or investment of time and energy into their offspring. They just leave their gametes, their eggs and sperm in a particular area, and chance will likely have some of them be successful. Many of them will not, but some will get lucky and survive to become adults themselves. Also, some will form pupa and go through a metamorphosis. When you have offspring from the oviparous type, the young will eat different types of food before metamorphosis than the parents eat, and therefore there's not a run on the same type of food, and the parent and the offspring, each with their own type, will have better survival rates. Second, we have ovoviviparous, and those are egg layers that keep the eggs inside the body until they hatch. So instead of just dumping the eggs off in a particular area, instead the parent will keep the eggs inside of them. They will hatch. However, there's no placenta connecting the mother's uterus to the offspring, and the advantage here, of course, is a little bit more protection. If the young are extremely vulnerable as small newborns, then being inside of the mother for a length of time will help survival rates. And then mammals are viviparous. That is going to require care of the zygote and the embryo. And the use of a placenta is the key thing that characterizes viviparous. And that is nothing more than a physical structure that allows developing young to exchange materials with the mother. So there is a physical connection between the two. Advantages to that, obviously much better protected. And with a placenta in place, immunity can be passed to the offspring. So it has some genetic tools for fighting off infections when they're vulnerable at a young age. Here's an example of ovoviviparous type of animal. Here we have a shark, and you can see that the newborns come out of these eggs right here, and they'll be alive in the mother until she releases them. So it's kind of a softer egg, and a number of them will be alive inside of the mother before she releases.
Strategies that animals
rays are like that.
Partake in.
Fish.
If we take a look at reptiles and birds, we know that both of them do provide eggs. Their young are in their eggs, and there is a food supply in there as well with this plentiful yolk that it has. So not only is there protection there, but with having a hard-shelled egg, the parent is going to invest some time and effort to keep their offspring viable and alive, and will protect those young inside the eggs. Occasionally, you'll have some species that don't run into others very often, so they have to also have a way to produce young. Otherwise, essentially, they die, and when you don't leave any offspring, of course, that is a pathway to extinction. So one solution that some animals do practice is hermaphrodism, which means that both male and female reproductive systems are present. And we see that everything from arthropods and protists to earthworms, which are hermaphroditic. A strange phenomenon that most people don't know about is the fact that some individuals can even undergo what's called a sex reversal. So when confronted with the problem of having no mates around, males can turn into females at times. Certain oysters in the ocean can do that, as well as females can turn into males, which we see with coral reef fish, the bluehead wrasse. So some very different mechanisms that these animals can cope with an environment that doesn't give it what it needs. So the plan B is to, in terms of evolutionarily taking the matters into your own genes' hands, if you will, and fixing the problem. Okay, so now that we've gone through these strategies that animals partake in to leave successful, viable offspring, with the second half of this lecture, we're going to talk about males. In our next lecture, we'll go over the whole female system. It's going to take a little bit longer, but we'll finish out this talk here today with the male reproductive system, how it works, and how it contributes to the next generation. All right, so the male reproductive system, our sex organs are called the gonads, and they are the paired testes, which are suspended in the scrotum. So that's what we have right here. Okay, the testes themselves are compartmentalized. There's what we call seminiferous tubules inside of them, which create sperm, and these sperm are going to eventually leave the testes when they are mature enough, and they're going to travel not very far, but to a structure called the epididymis, which is this tube right here that sits over the testes. So the sperm will swim in there, and they will mature over a number of weeks until they're ready to be expelled from the male body. When it is appropriate time, they'll be propelled into the vas deferens by muscular contractions upon sexual stimulation. The penis is the copulatory organ of males in many different species. It's composed of three cylindrical columns of spongy erectile tissue. You can see those in the picture. There's the corpora cavernosa, where there's two cylinders there, which get engorged with blood, and also the corpus spongiosum, which has the urethra, which passes through the center. So, upon sexual stimulation, blood flow will engorge the penis with blood and increase its size, and of course, that's called an erection. And an erection is triggered by the autonomic nervous system. And most of the time, it's the the parasympathetic division of the autonomic system, the rest and digest system, as we explained before. So what really happens here is that the blood is going to rush in by arteries into the three cylinders. And what happens is that the drainage for the blood is actually constricted in the veins. So that is what keeps the penis erect, is the fact that it's full of blood and you have the blood pressure pushing in from one side and the other end is closed. At the front of the penis, we have a tissue it can stimulate the penis. It's called the glans. And with enough stimulation, of course, it can lead to ejaculation. One of the tasks that we're going to have to do, one of the objectives that we have, is be able to trace the flow of sperm and ejaculate. Where does it begin? Where does it go? Where does it finish? Okay, so here we go. This entire pathway is going to start right here in the testes. Okay, we mentioned that. That's the site of sperm production. Step 2 is going to go to the epididymis right here. That's 2. Again, they're going to mature there for a couple of weeks. After a couple of weeks, they're going to find their way into the vas deferens, which is this long tube here, and that's going to be location number 3. Now, interesting the pathway that this particular tube goes, because it's going to go up back into the abdomen over the top of the bladder, the urinary bladder, and then it's going to come around here, and here it's going to join with what's called the seminal vesicle. Seminal vesicle is going to add some chemical contributions to the sperm, making the fluid a little bit richer. And after leaving the seminal vesicle, it's going to wind up in the center of this round organ right here, which is the prostate gland. And the prostate will also contribute content into the sperm and the seminal vesicles added chemicals as well. So now we're having what started out as just sperm now slowly turn into semen. And what we could do is we could label the seminal vesicle as number 4, prostate as number 5. Not really a location that the tube flows through, but it gets connected by this little thing right here, which is your bulbourethral gland, and that is going to secrete a little bit into the semen as well. So if we want to label that as a 6, we can. And then lastly, the pathway is out, of course, of the urethra, so that's going to be number 7. So interestingly, the pathway starts outside the body, travels up into the body, and then it goes outside the body again. So very unique pathway that sperm and semen take. Collectively, all those things that we said is seminal fluid. Semen is the shortened term for that. And if we want to take a look at what's inside of it, what makes it up, a very small portion of it is actually sperm, just 5%. However, 60% is significant, and that's what the seminal vesicles will secrete. Their fluid contains fructose, a simple sugar, and that's going to provide energy for the sperm on the long pathway they have to go. Also contributing, we said, was the prostate gland at 30%. It's going to secrete an alkaline fluid, which the sperm are going to need to neutralize the acidic environment of the vagina, and then a sperm activator that gets those tails really moving. And then the 5% comes from the bulbourethral glands, which is a mucus lubricant that's going to not only clean out any urine left in the urethra, but provide a slippery substrate for the sperm to swim through to avoid friction on their way out. Okay, I've linked a couple animations, so if you downloaded the PowerPoint, feel free to click those and watch those. They're very informative. Male fertility can be linked to a number of different things. We could take a look at the number of sperm that are ejaculated, the size of the sperm, the shape of the sperm, and even the motility. How well their tails move, and does it propel them forward, or is it more, are they swimming in circles? All those things matter. And here is a picture of a couple normal sperm versus a whole bunch of sperm that are not normal. This one has a gigantic head on it. This one has a little head. This one has two heads, two tails, weird shaped head, weird shaped mid piece. So there's all kinds of things that could go wrong, and chances are those would not produce viable offspring, nor would they ever even reach the cell. Okay. Although only one sperm is necessary for fertilization, millions will be introduced into the female. A number of 25 million per ml is actually a really small number for sperm and semen. What we are looking for sperm to be viable is counts up in the range of 300 million per milliliter. So 25 million is actually a very low number. Another thing it's going to take is teamwork for these sperm to get into the cell, or at least allow one to get in the cell. Their heads have these caps on them that dissolve the outer layer of the egg, and as they collectively work on it, one is eventually going to get in. So it's going to take the teamwork of hundreds, even thousands of them that do reach the egg. As far as male sexual intercourse, of course, it only makes sense that, if these sperm are ejaculated, they must find the female reproductive tract, and that's where we have the penis entering the vagina here. The way that a vagina is angled allows for a collection spot for the sperm, and it gives a better chance for conception to occur. The sperm are going to have to leave this area here, pass through the cervix, get into this uterus here, and then even take a right or a left to find an oviduct, a fallopian tube, and go looking for an egg. All that happens in the hours after a man ejaculates into a female. And again, if you have the PowerPoint linked up, I put a couple of links up here that have some animations of how this works if you're unaware of this whole process. So feel free to explore. Okay, keeping with the idea of ejaculation, it really happens in two steps. First step is called emission, where nerve impulses are going to be sent to the epididymis and vas deferens, and they are surrounded by smooth muscle. So when they squeeze, the sperm are going to enter the ejaculatory duct. Secretions will be released. First will be the bulbar urethra, we said, to kind of clean out any residue urine that's left in there. And then the semen gets expelled out of the penis by rhythmical muscle contractions that happens during an orgasm. And yeah, there we have it. Okay, so the sperm itself, they are, we said they're made in the seminiferous tubules, and here are those seminiferous tubules, and each one is in a little lobule, little compartment inside here. So there is a lot of tubing to produce a lot of sperm, because remember, 300 million, per ejaculate, that's a lot. Three pieces to sperm. They have a head, and on top of the head they have this acrosomal cap. Mid piece right here has the energy supply, and then a tail. Tail's going to go through an undulating whip-like type of motion to propel the sperm forward. And the head also has DNA inside of it. So right in here, what this head contains, of course, is the double helix of DNA. And each sperm is going to have a different collection of DNA. Because if you're familiar with the concept of meiosis, when cells meiotically divide, there's a great mix-up of genetic content. So some from the maternal chromosome, some from the paternal chromosome will wind up in this DNA head. And this is the same DNA that will combine with the female's single set, her haploid content of DNA, and when the two of them combine, that's how we wind up with a complete cell with a diploid set of chromosomes. This picture here shows the meiotic process, meiosis, for the male cells, where we go from spermatogonia, which you see up top here at the basement membrane of the seminiferous tubule. And these spermatogonia, these germ cells, they have 46 chromosomes. They have 23 pairs, and they're going to go through mitosis to produce more germ cells. Some of these germ cells will become primary spermatocytes. So they're going to move away from the edge, and they're going to get closer to the lumen of the seminiferous tubule, the center of the tube. And if you're a primary spermatocyte, what you're going to do is you're going to go through meiosis. Now, meiosis occurs in 2 rounds. The first round is a reductional division, which means that the diploid number of 46 chromosomes gets cut in half to 2 cells with 23 chromosomes. During the second meiotic division, what we see is we see a second split, and in the second split, we're going to wind up getting 4 cells of 23 chromosomes because each chromatid will go in its own separate side. In this first meiotic division, homologous chromosomes separate, and in the second one, sister chromatids separate. More on that when we cover meiosis in our next unit. But we still have a movement towards the lumen of the seminiferous tubule. When it finally does reach the lumen, that's where we see the spermatids becoming sperm cells. We see the tail growth, and there's some time before they mature. But once they are mature enough, they're going to release from the wall, and they're now going to head towards the epididymis next, where they're going to just mature for a couple of weeks until they're ready to go. Control of the testes happens really through some feedback systems, which involve the brain and the gonads themselves. So, a couple of key areas that are going to be important here that are notable is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is kind of like our ultimate master gland up there, and pituitary is kind of like the pharmacy. So the hypothalamus is going to release something called GnRH, and that's gonadotropin releasing hormone. And when it releases it to the pituitary responds by secreting something called FSH and LH. So FSH is called follicle stimulating hormone. Females have this too, but it does something different. And what it does is it stimulates the seminiferous tubules in the testes here to produce sperm more rapidly. So if the hypothalamus decides more sperm are needed, sends the GnRH to the pituitary. Pituitary then sends off FSH to the cells inside of the seminiferous tubules. On the other hand, we have luteinizing hormone, LH, and this one here stimulates interstitial cells or Leydig cells to produce testosterone, the male sex hormone. High concentrations of it inhibit the hypothalamus to secrete GnRH. So if we got high amounts of testosterone here, what it's going to do, it's going to shut down the pathway here and saying, we have high levels, we don't need more. So in that way, it's going to function as a negative feedback mechanism. Testosterone also on its own, when there's high levels of it, will prod the seminiferous tubule cells to produce more sperm as well. So here I like the flowchart version here, this big blue oval, that is the testes. And here's our hypothalamus secreting its gonadotropin releasing hormone, releasing that message to the anterior pituitary, which of course secretes its FSH and LH. And the FSH works on a certain type of cell in the seminiferous tubules called the Sertoli cells. And when there's a high sperm count, these Sertoli cells can also detect that. So they'll release a particular hormone called inhibin, which will work in a negative feedback capacity to shut down the anterior pituitary to stop producing this FSH. FSH, we said, stimulated the Sertoli cells to speed up spermatogenesis. On the other half here, we have luteinizing hormone, and it works on the Leydig cells, the interstitial cells, to ramp up production of testosterone. So when that goes up, it stimulates Sertoli to do more spermatogenesis. But also when testosterone levels are high, it's going to have a negative feedback mechanism in play against the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus. It will shut down those to producing more of their hormones. Now, if someone is artificially injecting themselves with testosterone, the levels are going to remain high and they're going to keep shutting down these here. And what that's going to do is to the testes is, unfortunately, they're going to atrophy because they're not getting normal stimulation from follicle stimulating hormone. And that's one of the drawbacks of anabolic steroids, where there's derivatives of testosterone that are injected into the body. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about testosterone kicking in during puberty for males. For example, the skin, it will respond to testosterone by producing a lot of facial and body hair. So, this guy here is going to get a beard, and of course, hairy chest and all the things that come with pubic hair as well. Baldness actually is testosterone has a trigger. So, unfortunately, 2/3 of men are destined for baldness. It's just a dominant trait, and high amounts of testosterone is one of the things that's going to cause baldness to possibly occur. During puberty, testosterone wakes up the male sex organs. So now, the sperm production is in full effect. The prostate will begin to grow. Erectile function is enhanced. In terms of the entire body, you'll start to see, boys who enter puberty start to gain muscle mass and get stronger. The testosterone will have an effect on the brain. It will increase the sex drive, increase the aggression as well in young men. Bone marrow, testosterone is linked to higher red blood cell production, so we'll see that occur. And bone density and maintenance will also be affected by high amounts of testosterone. Okay, so in summary here today, we took a look at the various reproductive strategies that animals take, whether there's sufficient and normal resources around, or whether there's a special condition, where a different pathway must be taken in order to reproduce successfully. We followed it up by taking a look at the male and his sex organs, and what we call gametes, which are sex cells. In his case, is the sperm, how they're produced, where they go, and as far as their pathway, and secondary effects of testosterone. So I hope this taught you a little bit. Our next lecture will be on the female reproductive system, so I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.